Karate friends, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Marc Graves, and today I want to talk about all kinds of ways people modified their bodies for cosmetic purposes in the ancient Roman Empire. So there were two primary sources that particularly helped inspire and inform this video that I want to reference here right at the beginning. The first one is an article called Masculinity, Appearance, and Sexuality, Dandies in Roman Antiquity by Kelly Olson. And the other is a chapter from the book Oxford Handbook of Science and Medicine in the Classical World on Pharmacology in the Early Roman Empire by John Scarborough. Beauty standards are something that seems like every culture has. It's almost innately human to decide as a group that we are into X or Y, and we will argue with you if you disagree with us, if you think something else is attractive. And ancient Rome is no different. They had their beauty standards, and people would work very hard to either achieve them for themselves or to pressure others into achieving them. And there were many different things you could do to try to boost your appearance, and both men and women engaged in these, interestingly enough. And men would give each other a harder time for engaging in these different procedures, not necessarily because it was associated with homosexuality, but more because it was assumed if you were spending a lot of time trying to look nice and be fussy, that you were spending too much time trying to look nice, trying to get laid, that you might be hypersexual, whether it was into men or into women. Either way, you want sex too much, and you're spending too much time on getting attention as opposed to spending time getting things done. Now, that was the stereotype. It wasn't necessarily true. Julius Caesar was a great dresser, but he was clearly not laying around doing nothing all the time. So that was the stereotype, and despite it, many men, as I said, still engaged and did these procedures to themselves to try to increase their attractiveness, and both men and women seem to have found these efforts attractive. Most of the things that I found for this video have to do with making yourself look as young as possible. It seems like to the Romans being youthful was extremely important and attractive, and they would do all kinds of things to try to achieve this. And I'm going to start with some of the lighter, less startling things and then move on to the more hardcore stuff. So first off is just makeup, right? Both men and women would occasionally apply makeup, and Juvenal has a quote where he pokes fun at specifically a man who's being a little too fussy with his makeup in Juvenal's opinion. So he says, "One of these men has blackened his eyebrows with damp soot and is extending them with a slanting pencil, raising his fluttering eyes as he applies the makeup." So poking fun at him a little bit there. Then we also have depillation, which is hair removal, and you would have men being clean shaven in Rome. That was generally the fashion, but then a few of them would go a step further and they'd have the hair on their arms, sometimes their legs, sometimes even their genitals either shaved or plucked, which sounds very painful, but apparently Romans of both genders were really into that, so that was the fashion for at least some subgroup of Romans. Then we have people dyeing their hair, classic, right? Martial, though, has a really salty poem about this that I love. He says, "You simulate youth, Latinus, by dyeing your hair. So suddenly a raven who were but just now a swan. You don't fool everybody. Proserpina knows your hair is white, and she will drag the mask from your head." So Proserpina there is another name for the goddess Persephone, or the goddess of the dead, right? So he's saying, you can dye your hair all you want, but you are still dying soon, buddy. You are not getting away. So I like that poem. Finally, some people would get false teeth, and we have Martial again to thank for a poem that mentions this. "Fidentinus, do you take yourself for a poet on the strength of my verses and what it believed? Just so Igla thinks she has teeth, in virtue of purchased bones and Indian horn. Just so Lycoris, who is blacker than a falling mulberry, fancies herself in white lead. You too, by the reasoning that makes you a poet, will have a head of hair when you are bald." So Martial poking fun at this guy for apparently taking credit for some of his poetry, and then the reference to Lycoris in there not being attractive because she is dark is not necessarily in reference to racism. It's more to the fact that the Romans have this beauty standard where men are supposed to be dark and tan and women are supposed to be really white and pale, because women are supposed to spend all their time inside doing women things, and men are supposed to spend all their time outside exercising and fighting and farming and all the man things, right? So if you're a man in Rome and you have dark skin, you're good to go, but if you're a woman, you're gonna have a hard time. So now we start to get into some of the more intense stuff. So Circumcision was a thing that happened in the Roman Empire. Some people engaged in that, but not everybody liked the result, or at least the look of it. So we have a medical writer, Celsus, who records a procedure to allegedly reverse circumcision, or at least give you the appearance of being uncut. And it sounds frankly terrifying and brutal, and I'm not sure why anyone ever opted to have this done, but apparently it was a thing that somebody was interested in. Now, the passage is extremely long and gets into all kinds of detail, and I don't have time to read all of it here, sadly, so please check it out if you are interested in the full thing, but I'm just gonna jump around and give you the highlights. From the above, we pass to operations on the penis itself. And if the glans is bare and the man wishes for the look of the thing to have it covered, that can be done, but more easily on a boy than on a man, and one in whom the defect is natural than in one who, after the custom of certain races, has been circumcised, and in one who has the glans small and the adjacent skin rather ample, while the penis itself is shorter, rather than in one in whom the conditions are contrary. Now, the treatment for those in whom the defect is natural is as follows. The prepuce around the glans is seized, stretched out until it actually covers the glans, and they're tied. Next, the skin covering the penis just in front of the pubes is cut through in a circle until the penis is bared, but great care is taken not to cut into the urethra nor into the blood vessels there. This done, the prepuce slides forward towards the tie, and a sort of small ring is laid bare in front of the pubes, to which lint is applied in order that flesh may grow and fill it up. And for the following days, the patient is to fast until nearly overcome by hunger, lest satiety excite that part. When the inflammation has ceased, the penis should be bandaged from the pubes to the corona. Over the glans, the plaster is applied with the other end of the probe. This is done in order that the lower part may agglutinate, whilst the upper part heals without adhering. My favorite part of this passage is at the end, where he says when you're in recovery, you need to eat as little as possible so that you can't get a boner because you'll hurt yourself, basically. And it's an extremely brutal passage, but that part I find very funny. From another medical work, Materia Medica by Pedanius Dioscorides, we get this recipe and then application for a plaster that can be used apparently for all kinds of cosmetic procedures. The whole herb, when ground up and applied as a plaster on a man's testicles, prevents ejaculation during his sleep. A plaster applied to a woman's genitalia causes her milk to cease and prevents unwedded girls' breasts from growing too large. And this plaster causes a young boy's testicles to wither away. So again, I find that first story pretty funny about trying to prevent wet dreams, but then it's interesting when he gets into them trying to prevent girls' breasts from getting too big. So I suppose from that we can infer that big boobs were not the fashion in Rome. Then finally we have the bit about shriveling young boys' testicles, and this gets into some dark stuff, right? In the ancient world, there were many people who were extremely attracted to young boys, and this was not seen as a moral problem or negative. It was fine for the most part. And there was even a term for young boys that were kept as sort of sexual slaves, delicatus, was often applied to them, and these are just young boys that are kept for sexual purposes, and often they would be castrated in an effort to preserve that young, delicate, slender look that people were so attracted to. So in this case, castration was a cosmetic procedure that people would have done on themselves or would have done on their slaves, and apparently you did not have to do it surgically. You did have some chemical castration options, which is wild that people were that interested in doing this to themselves and to others. Thank you so much for checking out this video on beauty standards and body alterations in the ancient Roman Empire. Special thank you to subscribers and to patrons, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Karate.